The Swaziland Solidarity Network is accusing King Mswati III of killing renowned human rights lawyer and activist Thulani Maseko. Maseko was shot dead at his home in Luyengo, south of Mbabane, in the Kingdom of Eswatini on Saturday night. He was also the chairperson of the pro-democracy Multi-Stakeholder Forum. Meanwhile, the government of the Kingdom of Eswatini has expressed condolences to the family of the human rights lawyer. Let's talk a little bit more about this story. We're joined by Zweli Dlamini. He's the editor at Swaziland News. Zweli, thank you for joining us. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Zweli, let's begin by just laying out the facts. What do we know so far about Maseko's shooting on Saturday night?
Thulani Maseko, a prominent human rights lawyer in Eswatini, was assassinated on Saturday evening. And before the assassination, King Mswati, when addressing his regiments at Mbabane royal residence on the same day, and he had threatened to deal decisively with those who are calling for democratic reforms in Eswatini. In fact, he said there were people whom he said were causing instability in the country, and he made it sure that he will deal with them, and he did not deny the existence of mercenaries in Eswatini, as previously reported.
So at the moment, this is what was said beforehand, but on the night of the incident, I'm reading some reports, and again, these are reports, and this is not fact. This still is being investigated and needs to be investigated more. But there are allegations out there that police actually escorted assassins that were from the presidency away from the scene of the killing. Do you know more about this? Are these allegations that you have heard of as well?
Yes, of course. In fact, it was our publication that reported this story. Yesterday, we interviewed Thulani Maseko, a sister to the late human rights lawyer Thulani Maseko. And of course, we were supposed to speak to his brother, but the family decided that we must speak to the sister to the late human rights lawyer. And she disclosed that there were people who were camping outside Maseko's home. And when his brother, or when her brother took a bike to follow what she described as the hitman, the police were camping outside Maseko's home, and they refused to join in the chase. So thereafter, one of the men who was camping next to Maseko's home then revealed himself as a police officer. And then we asked ourselves why the police were camping next to Maseko's home. Yeah. And they were camping next to Maseko's home with the equipment waiting to respond to a shooting scene. So there are reasonable suspicion that, of course, police might be involved in this killing, because even if they were told that here is the car that was transporting those who allegedly shot Maseko, they refused to investigate and chase the car with the intention of apprehending the suspect.
Yeah, so obviously we've got these kind of stories that are emanating, and we know that this needs to be investigated thoroughly, and we'll get to that in a moment. But perhaps we need to talk a little bit about Maseko and the kind of history that he has in Swaziland, which has been a very tumultuous history where, you know, there's been times where he's been jailed. He has spoken out about the king on many occasions. I mean, he even held the king and said that, why are you changing the name to Eswatini when that money should be used for the betterment of the people? So he was a very outspoken individual involved in politics and journalism as well. But let's talk about his history in Swaziland and you know, leading to this moment.
Thulani Maseko was a highly regarded human rights lawyer. Apart from what you've just said, he was leading the cause for democratic reforms in Swaziland. He was the chairperson of the Multi-Stakeholder Forum, which is a coalition of political parties and civil society groups. And of course, he was corresponding with the Southern African Development Community on politics, defense and security, which is Troika. on the same issues regarding the political instability in Swaziland. So he was a very, very key person in the transitional process, because as you might be aware, Eswatini is in the midst of a political crisis. And of course, SADC and other international organizations has been corresponding with the pro-democracy group. So Thulani was playing that role, in fact, the diplomatic role in as far as the transitional process is concerned. And when it comes to the cases he has handled before, of course, he was a key player in challenging the government to adhere to the provisions of the Constitution and award the people a free primary education as the Constitution stipulates. And of course, the government, after the Constitution was announced in 2005, there was some little bit of reluctance, and the government was alleging that there were no funds to fund this program. But Thulani, with the help of other key political players in Swaziland, was able to challenge that. The court granted the order forcing government to fund free primary education. And in 2018, after King Mswati changed the name from Swaziland to Eswatini, and again, Thulani Maseko went to court challenging the king. In fact, he was alleging that the king was supposed to consult the people first through parliament before changing the constitution. King Mswati is an absolute monarch, as you might be aware, and he just wake up in the morning and change the name of the country, and without even going to parliament to influence the constitution. So Thulani Maseko was challenging that. And one of the key cases where Thulani was involved, Thulani Maseko was a part-time writer of the Nation magazine. And at some point in 2014, he challenged or criticized the Chief Justice. In fact, he was a key player in addressing what could be described as a breakdown in the administration of justice in Swaziland. And thereafter, he was charged with contempt of court together with one of the highly regarded editors in Swaziland, which is Peggy Makubu. And they spent about 2 years in jail.
So much. I mean, there is so much history that led to this moment on Saturday night. But I know there have been calls from, many different parties to have this investigated at a high level outside of Eswatini, because there are fears that this is not going to be investigated properly. In fact, there are calls on SADC as well to look into this. Perhaps you want to elaborate a little bit more on it.
Yes, of course. In Eswatini, as the situation stands, the political temperatures are rising, and we're witnessing shootings from the pro-democracy movement and the conservative side. But the main perpetrators of this violence are the police. It is King Mswati, because King Mswati, whenever he addressed the nation these days, he always made sure that he threatened those who are calling for democratic reforms. And 48 hours ago, he made the same threat. So you cannot then trust the police with such investigation. In fact, because in Eswatini we have no what we can call an independent police investigation, independent police complaints commission. We have no such institutions in Swaziland. So it might be proper to then have an internationally recognized commission that will investigate the death of Thulani Maseko. In fact, yesterday I was speaking to one of the African Union leaders. They want to take up this matter. They want to ensure that this assassination is properly investigated. And then we as the media, we fully support an internationally recognized or internationally influenced investigation that will ensure that Thulani Maseko's assassination is investigated, and then we receive a comprehensive and a credible report.
Yeah, I mean, I know both the the calls going out to SADC and to the AU, and as you're saying now, any other international organization that wants to get involved. I suppose that the irony doesn't fall on deaf ears when you say just 48 hours ago, King Mswati was actually saying that he will silence any critics, and it was just 48 hours ago that we saw this assassination taking place. This happened at his home. His wife and child or children, please, perhaps you can tell us more, were in the house at the time of the assassination?
It's a very, very painful situation. In fact, it was a very, very painful situation. And maybe if you can consult one of your editors, I sent some of the videos there to one of your editors yesterday, where you can see the children were crying next to the dead body of their father. The body was, there was blood in the sitting room, and the children were crying, the relatives were crying. So you can imagine the trauma that these children went through. It is a very, very painful experience. And we wish, as Swazis and all peace-loving citizens in Eswatini and those who are outside the country, that this could be resolved as a matter of urgency, so that we can restore peace and stability.
Yeah, indeed. And I know there are condolences coming in far and wide for Thulani Maseko. I'm reading just one from our former public protector, Professor Thulani Maseko, saying it's heartbreaking to note the assassination of Eswatini human rights lawyer and democracy activist Thulani Maseko. In the words of, she quotes somebody saying, "We can no longer plead ignorance as people get murdered for demanding justice and freedom." And this is the same narrative, no doubt, that you are spreading here. So let's leave it there. We will stay updated and keep in contact with you to just see developments around this story, but still fresh and new, the news coming through from Eswatini. Thank you to Zweli Dlamini, editor out and about at the Swaziland News, speaking to us about the killing, or as he's calling it, assassination of renowned Eswatini human rights lawyer and activist, as well as a writer, journalist, Thulani Maseko.